and more us, girl.
Whoa! I finally got my hands on this. How's it going, guys? Today I'm doing a review of Towa Tei's newest full album titled LP. The concept of the album it's kind of interesting. Towa Tei's been talking a lot lately about his obsession with records, which is kind of interesting. There's a lot of little kind of like motifs and themes and stuff like that on the record that sort of make it what it is. But I'm just really excited to get into this. I love this record. I think it's one of his best. Towa Tei, for the unfamiliar, is a Japanese musician who, in his realm, I think he holds, at least in Japan, a similar amount of clout and perhaps strangely and yet appropriately comparable of a role to that of DJ Shadow, J Dilla, or someone like One-Thrix Point Never. If you don't think you've heard of Towa Tei, you probably actually have, because this is him here. His music offers an extremely playful listening experience that is also equal parts smug, edgy, ironic, and self-aware. Most of his work relies to some degree on the referential or retro-future ethos, and it tends to be, at least more often than not, fairly uplifting and upbeat, especially this record. Never excessively, but something about listening to his music just always puts me in a really good mood. I could see some people getting turned off of how quirky and ironic some of it is, but I think that's actually his greatest strength. He manages to evolve from album to album while maintaining like a rarely consistent cohesion and presence in his work. It's no surprise that he continues to collaborate and work with some of the country's best talent who have kind of carved out some of these genres since they were conceived in Japan. Specifically, YMO's Hirumi Hosono and Takahashi Yukihiro, who are both present in this album. If you're already familiar with him and you've heard his records before, I would say that this record is a case of, I think Towa Tei, like a lot of his contemporaries, has been continuously moving towards the less is more ideology of composing. So Sunny, Lucky, and Emo, which kind of came out in the 2000s, Emo being the most recent, it kind of sounded like with each release he sort of distills his work to its core a little bit. And what I mean by that is less instruments, less layers, and each note is a little bit more targeted and precise. A little bit like what Cornelius did with Point, if you have ever listened to that before. You can actually get a quick close-up of the album artwork here. Now let's take a look at that back. Let's get into it. Let's see what it says. So, Towa Tei was born in Japan in 1964, moved to New York City in 1987. Towa debuted as a member of D-Light. In 1990, solo debuted with LP Future Listing. In 1994, Towa moved to Japan in 1995. Towa released second LP Sound Museum in 1997, Last Century Modern in 1999. Towa moved to Nanago in 2000. The fourth LP Flash was released in 2005. Fifth LP Big Fun was released in 2009. The sixth LP Sunny was released in 2011. Seventh LP Lucky was released in 2013. Eighth LP Cute was released in 2015. Emo released in 2017. LP, this one, produced in 2020, released in 2021. In addition, also acting as Sweet Robots Against the Machine, Towa Tei is also a member of the band Meta 5, led by Takahashi Yukihiro, Keigo Yamada, Yoshinori Sonohara, Towa Tei, Tomohiko Gondo, and Leo Imai. Very important producer in Japanese electronic music. If you listen to anything that is like sample-based or plunderphonics or any generally experimental electronic music, give his stuff a listen. I wouldn't say that he's strictly a sample-based musician. He's really competent with synths. He does a lot of tracks that are just like good songs overall as much as they are experimental. So I don't know. I think there's a little something in here for everyone, if I'm honest. Let's get into this. What have we got? Comes with a little lyric book. You can tell how complicated the lyrics are in these songs. They're not. It says, all songs written and arranged by Towa Tei for Voltage Unlimited Inc. Mastering engineer Yoshinori Tsunohara. Mix engineer Go Hotada. Artwork Tomo Gokida. Art direction Towa Tei. Design with diagram. Special thanks to Meta 5 crew. A couple other people I'm not familiar with. Very nice heavy vinyl. I like that. 0 and 1. Side 1, Birthday, DJ, Fabulous, Magic, Emez. Side 0, Consumer Electronics, Mind Power, Rendezvous, Ringware, and Nomadology. Very nicely presented. All of the print and the quality and everything, and the design on this is very nice. Birthday is a really strong opening track. It features vocals from the legendary Harumi Hosono and Hana. Harumi Hosono, along with Takahashi Yukihiro, being two of the most important electronic musicians in Japan, members of Yellow Magic Orchestra. I would love to talk about these two someday. So in Birthday, I really like how he doesn't draw attention to the fact that this is a sample and electronic based piece until at one moment he actually decides he really wants to, and he brings in this really engaging low pitched synth that comes about 1 minute into the track. And the other thing that you notice when you hear this synth is it draws attention to how carefully the use of both channels of stereo have been implemented. The synth is amusing, it sounds really cool, and I think I actually kind of laughed the first time I heard it. It just really serves to help achieve the sort of outlandish playfulness that you have going on. The vocals are very good. Hana puts on a good performance, and Harumi's presence add a bit of interesting depth. They are fairly minimal and act more as instruments, more percussive rather than delivering lyrics in, like choruses and verses. But overall, every vocal performance on this album is really nice. The instrumentation and drumming are a lush combination of acoustic instrumentation, probably mostly samples, and other subtle, abstract or electronic samples, glitches, and synths. Rather depending on a conventional song structure to progress the track, Towa Tei gracefully ebbs and flows layers and textures and instruments to build and release tension and movement. Most of these tracks have a really nice beginning, middle, and end. The second track, DJ, is a timeless showcase of masterful plunderphonics. It's really rare that you get this good of a sample-based plunderphonics piece that is also mixed and mastered to absolute perfection. For the mastering, we have Yoshinori Tsunohara to thank, another contemporary of Towa Tei, who also created similarly styled sample-based music in the 90s under the Shibuya Kei movement around the turn of the century. Really thoughtful mastering really elevates this record and improves the already high taste level that is present. In some parallel universe, some bedroom beats producer took the exact same materials like synths, drums, and samples, and could have just made something really boring. There's like a secret spice to Towa Tei's work that really shines through, and DJ really works as a great signature piece. I think I read in the All Music review that this track is sort of like a self-portrait. That's very apt. I would agree with that. Once again, every beat and note of the music is used sparingly. Rhythm, layering, and some interesting harmony and chord changes are used to create interesting movement through the track. And 2 tracks into the album, it's really apparent how much love and care has been put into this record. Fabulous has some really incredibly rich vocal harmonies that really make the track feel just very inviting and warm. The retro-futurism is really strong in this track. He's really done a good job of choosing like intriguing retro samples, and that is just what elevates this album. Something kind of funny about this track in particular is that it reminded me of when I visited the Plasticarium Museum in Brussels. Kind of a cool, crazy place. Fabulous is a track that I think you could actually have realistically seen on one of his older albums. It does really carry that kind of classical sound that he has. Once again, the vocals are very minimal and more used as a compositional tool rather than a just delivery for lyrics or a story. The vibrancy of textures and motif in many of these tracks are very visual. I think Towa's imagination and sense of place and emotion are very well developed in his music. And one thing that helps bring this forward is the universe of superb graphical design, video work, and visual style that accompanies all of his work. That's definitely not something that is skimped on for this release. It's just very beautifully presented. The next track was Magic, a track, kind of the lead single for the album. It came out during the first wave of the pandemic. The video is interesting because it's appropriately sparse of actual people. The kind of like stop motion visual collage style of video brings a tangible visual counterpart to the work that manages to be unique by itself, but also have a cohesion amongst his other visual output. His roots as a graphic designer and careful attention to the visual design language that surrounds and embellishes his work have truly helped him achieve something of a distinct universe in which all of his music seems to live. There are definitely a lot of artists in the late 90s who kind of strive to create this ironic, retro-futuristic sensibility about their work, but in my opinion, nobody quite does it with the same effectiveness as Towa Tei. Consumer electronics on side 0 is very interesting. He's almost added to the spiritual canon of the YMO universe. And he features Takashi Yukihiro in the track. He both adapts the style and collaborates with the talent, not just here, but through the entire album, honestly. Each synth is fully realized, voiced, and designed perfectly for its place in the mix. The appropriately titled 7th track, Mind Power, is groovy and beat forward, but also has some dissonance to it, which really does break things up nicely. In fact, that kind of describes the latter half of the album. Things get a bit more beat focused, and honestly, it's just a lot of serious flexing of great sample production and mastering. Rendezvous is similar. This one once again reminds me of some of his older work, almost a little bit more under the Sweet Robots Against the Machine moniker. He tends to release music that's a little bit more, I would say, like abstract and cute under this name, and he still does material under that. It's like an interesting alter ego. Ringware has a similar MO to the previous tracks, but it's one that really relies on repetition and build-up. Once again, the choice of samples really make the track. Actually, in Ringware, there's a cool moment in the track where about a minute in, there's what feels like is about to be a drum breakdown at first, but then it just keeps going, and then it goes on for a few more seconds, and then it just takes another step back. It's like climbing down a ladder. The track is unpredictable and fun. For a 56-year-old guy, Towa Tei is super with it. This album strikes a perfect balance of timeless and fresh, and I honestly think this will be remembered as one of his strongest. The refinement and taste level on this album is really second to none. Maybe working with Meta5 has sort of inspired him to keep pushing the envelope a little bit. I don't know. The theme of this album being a love letter to LPs and record collecting really does shine through as a genuine source of inspiration for the work. And once again, if you have any interest in sample-based or even synth influenced music whatsoever, I think you owe it to yourself not to just check out this record, but to take a look at his back catalog. Anyways, that's most of what I have to say about the album. Obviously, I'm crazy about it. The last thing I want to do today is take a quick look at a very cool interview I found about this album. I'm just going to read some of the interesting parts of it. I'll put a link to it down in the description. This kind of gives you a little bit of an interesting insight into his thought process, and hopefully you'll feel inspired to check this record out. I think it's very special, and this is on Tokion.jp. Author is Yuya Watanabe. Published on the 30th of March, 2021. Towa Tei's new album, LP, and his hardcore love for records. Towa Tei, celebrating the 30th anniversary of his musical career, has released his 10th studio album, LP. As we all know, LP is a 12-inch analog record, a sound storage medium that also happens to symbolize Towa Tei's journey as a musician. In 2020, Towa Tei stated to have bought more records than ever, reaffirming his affection towards them. And for this interview, we asked him about the latest album, LP, and his overabundant love of records. One thing I didn't mention before was the final track on the album. It's much different from everything else on there. It's a little bit more of a abstract, moody kind of affair. And here in the interview, we have a question. What about the last song on the album, Nomadology? I feel in the influence of the pandemic in its melancholic ambience, as well as in the title. To which Towa Tei responds, the title is based on a real-life experience last year, right when Japan declared the state of emergency. I was on a cab to Nishi-Azubu, and normally it would have been full of people around that area, but there was no one on the streets, and every store had a takeout poster up front. I've never seen anything like that before. After that, as soon as I returned to my room in Tokyo, I made Nomadology with my synths. At first, I was planning to use another track as the ending to the album, but I thought it would be good to have a song like this in 2020, so I changed it at the end. I wonder if that was Towa Tei's mental landscape for 2020. Interesting little bit of context about that final track. Another little interesting note about this album from the interview is the lyrics from the fourth song, Magic, also include the words My Yellow Magic. To which he responds, the first LP I ever bought was YMO's Solid State Survivor. For me, that was the reason I fell in love with music, and I accidentally remembered that it was a transparent yellow vinyl. Was it a transparent yellow vinyl? Oh, I have a plain one. I don't have a cool one. I just have a boring regular one. Oh well. Well, it was worth checking. Anyways, even the person in this interview says, I see it as your best after Lucky. And he replies that I feel like I've closed a chapter in my life. The LP of Lucky, which was designed by Yaoi Kusama, was like a family heirloom to me. The album jackets after that one were designed by Tomo Gotika, who is also an analog devotee. Actually, now that I think about it, I may have rejoined the record religion thanks to Gotika-kun. And when I listen to records, I don't have to think about anything else. I think that LP, visuals included, is close to being the perfect record. I want everyone to forget about the pandemic for 40 minutes while listening to this. And I think he did definitely capture the effect that it had on people when it came out. If you haven't already, I hope you go check out this unique, interesting album. A little personal note that I like to add onto these videos is that musicians don't really make a lot of money off of streaming. So if you have the option to purchase it physically or buy merch or somehow see the artist live, that goes a lot further to getting money into the pocket of these musicians. Anyways, thanks for listening to me talk about this record. I will see you guys next time.